Welcome to KUHS The Stream on Malady Drive. We are live. This is a stream on Malady Drive. You are watching Weekend Boost. I am your host, Paul Lane, and we're so thankful to have you watching us today. I don't know what was going on in the background over here. That'll stop in a minute, I hope. So we'll talk through that. Anyway, guys, as you know, usually we talk about past guests that have been on the radio. Today I want to get right into the topic that we're going to be talking about. I am the author of The Caregiver's Handbook, a self-help love story, and available through the radio station. You can call here or you can email me at laneman09@comcast.net, and I will send you an autographed copy of the book. Guys, every week we talk on the show, and we talk about, I always bring up, the organization CALMA, the Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors, and we've had, several of the founders of CALMA on the station, and today we have Ricardo Laforet, and over 50 years a Chicano activist. He was one of the co-founders of CALMA, and ever since the first time I met Mr. Laforet, I have been so excited to have him on the show. So this is kind of like the highlight of my program. And so, Ricardo, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, and thank the station for the wonderful community service that you're providing here. I think it's education is always at the top of my agenda, and to educate the masses about things that they might not otherwise hear on commercial television or radio. It's just a wonderful thing that you're doing here. So thank you, and thank everyone associated with this wonderful program. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. I talk about everyone's looking for a hero. That is my slogan on the show. Everyone's looking for a hero, and if you can't find one, be one. Guess what? I love this show because I get to be around heroes, man. And exactly one of the reasons I've taken the role of being the host of this show is because I like opening people's eyes. I like making people aware, and associating with people who are really making things happen is what you got to do, folks. How do you become a hero? You look at yourself, gather all your resources, count what you have, and then gratitude. I have found that gratitude has been the really key thing in happiness for my life, and having Ricardo here, just reminds me of how many things I have to be grateful for, and how important it is for us to get the word out, educate people. Well, on the way here, Ricardo picked me up on the way here. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. And we talked a lot about Chicano activists in the city of Denver and how they're active, and that's the word activist, and they're not there to cause trouble or to break windows or to cause riots, but they're there to open people's eyes and to show them who we really are. When you started as a Chicano activist, you were a young man.
I was. It was actually in April marked 52 years.
Wow.
The year was 1968. It was a pivotal year in the history of this country. I think the Tet Offensive in Vietnam had happened, which had opened everybody's eyes. Even Walter Cronkite on the evening news had suggested that perhaps the war was unwinnable. So that was big coming from Walter Cronkite. In April of that year, Martin Luther King was assassinated, followed by Bobby Kennedy in the same year. So it was a year, a very tumultuous year, and I had already heard of Cesar Chavez, and I was interested in what he was doing, and Corky Gonzalez had founded the Crusade the year before, and I went to this conference over at the old Loretto Heights College. And I kind of on a lark, a friend asked me to go, and the conference was about negative stereotypes in the media. And I come to find out that at that time, the only Mexican on TV was this ridiculous caricature called the Frito Bandito, whose only job was to steal Fritos from unsuspecting white folks in cars and then run away. He was a very offensive character.
Wow,
He
wow.
used to speak like this, you know, panzon, guns, swarthy, dishonest, mustachioed. And throughout the conference, I started learning about ways to look at things, to look behind the facade, to see what was really going on. And I became very interested in that. And what we did at that time is we went to the Frito-Lay company and said, you need to take this pendejo off the air because he's an affront to Chicanos, to Mexicans, and they did, you know. And so we were mildly surprised that they relented. And but I thought to myself, wow, that's you know, sometimes all you really need to do is withhold purchasing power to talk to the man, so to get him to listen.
Vote with your dollars.
Yeah, it was an economic weapon. So that kind of got me started. And then in April of the following year, '69, I was living down in the Arkansas Valley. A group of Chicanos had asked me to present their petition to the school board to be able to celebrate Cinco de Mayo as a school-sanctioned activity. I thought, you know, why not? It seemed like a slam dunk at the time. Why would they say no? I mean, after all, what in effect are you asking for? Merely to celebrate the culture of half the student body. But I was wrong. The school board took big offense at what we were proposing. They started complaining, or why do you want to celebrate Mexican holidays? Aren't you an American? Aren't you proud to be an American? All sorts of nonsense like that. And so I was surprised. But so the school board said, come back next Tuesday, we'll take it under advisement and we'll give you our answer then. So the following Tuesday, me and the same group of students went, and we found that the school board meeting had been moved to the auditorium, which I thought was odd because, I mean, 5 or 6 people are the only people that ever went to these meetings anyway, you know. And we walked into the auditorium, and there's 300 people, and they're all glaring and appeared to be angry with me. So when it comes our time to speak, the school board president says, there's only one item on the agenda, and we're here to show Ricardo what it is that we think of his idea. Well, everyone who is against what Ricardo's doing, please signify by standing. And all 300 of them stood up. I mean, I was shocked, humiliated, belittled. There I was, you know, first time up to bat, and I get my butt handed to me in front of the whole town. I found out later that they had sent messages to parents that I was radicalizing their children, that I was leading them down a path that was only going to lead to civil disobedience and so forth. I was set up, and like I said, I was humiliated by that. But there's I like to point to that moment as my looking into the abyss moment. You look into the abyss, and you find out that you're alone.
Yeah.
And so from here on out, you're going to have to go it alone.
You feel like a small fish in a big pond, huh?
Well, and that was, I would say, looking back on it now, 52 years later, I would say that was my looking into the abyss moment. And from that moment, I was reborn as a Chicano activist. And I've been on that road ever since. This was, like I said, '69. It's 2000. So 51, 52 years. And I've never regretted it because I've been on this road for a long time. I mean, I can't do the things I used to do just out of pure, I'm viejito now, you know, I can't. I once marched from Pueblo to Denver for farm workers back in 1970. Now I have trouble getting up from the basement to my, you know, so I can't do the things that I used to do, but the things that I can do, I can still talk. I'm still a pretty good speaker, and I can teach. And
you're still active.
Well, I'm still active in that regard. And so what I do, you know, I don't know if you knew this or not, but I perform tours, guided tours of the Chicano Movement exhibit at the History Colorado Museum on 12th and Broadway. And I also get asked to go to high schools and colleges to deliver speeches or workshops on the history of the Chicano movement in Colorado, Colorado specifically, but the Chicano movement in general. So I love doing that. It's something that I do, something that I do well, but it's something that comes from the heart. You know, it's not something that I can make a living at, but it's part of my contribution. Since I can't march 100 miles anymore, I can at least talk to young people coming up about what it meant. You know, the Chicano movement changed lives for the better, and yet most of the people that I talk to, they're not aware that there was a Chicano movement, and that needs to change. I've advocated for the longest time now that the history of the Chicano movement is American history, and it should be treated as such. This isn't something that this was percolating ever since the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed in 1848, and Chicanos who were annexed by conquest became American citizens.
Yep.
I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're living in Alamosa, Colorado in 1846.
You're Mexico.
You're Mexico. You're a Mexican. 2 years later, you are now an American citizen, and you haven't moved an inch.
Yep. My ancestors were in Walsenburg.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
The same. So that happened right in my own family. You know.
So you didn't. Okay. So now you're an American, right?
Yeah.
But you don't know anything about George Washington and the cherry tree or any of that other stuff. So you got to learn it. Not only that, you don't know the language. So you begin a little atrasado to begin with. But what the government said is those Mexicans who wish to continue being Mexicans, well, the border has moved. You know, you didn't have to go to El Paso and cross over now to be in your country. Those of you who stay are to be treated like any other citizen. Well, we know that didn't happen. We know that didn't happen.
And we've read Virginia Sanchez's book.
Yes. Well, we know that didn't happen.
Yes.
So that, to me, when people ask me, like when I'm speaking in the schools, when did the Chicano movement actually start? You might as well say it started then, because in 1848 we began an existence, a schizophrenic existence in this country. It pretty much said, you're equal, but you're not equal.
You're not equal.
You're not equal.
Separate but unequal.
And and so that really began this march forward that I think really reached its high point at the Chicano movement. That's not to say that things hadn't happened before. You know, in 1929, LULAC was formed, and they did a great job. LULAC was kind of an assimilationist model. They wanted to be American, and well, they should. They wanted the same opportunities. And then in 1948, the American GI Forum was formed, and that was good too. Also founded by Dr. Hector Garcia. And so all of these little things that had happened prior to the movement, we're grateful for, because they kept the whole pot percolating. While the Chicano movement was really about to explode.
With great resistance.
Yeah, in the 60s, when people came together and said, enough, basta, we're American citizens, we're entitled to the same rights and privileges as anybody else. And I think to make it, to pinpoint, the main difference is that Chicanos weren't asking. They were demanding. This is ours. We want it. We want it all, and we want it now. And that was something that was terribly exciting and romantic and subversive to me. And so I'd always been the kind of guy who didn't take no crap from anybody, you know. So when the Chicano movement came along, we were perfect for each other. We were a perfect match for one another.
Idea whose time has come.
Yeah. So I threw myself wholeheartedly into it, and I've never regretted a moment of it. The Chicano movement, my involvement, has been one of the great joys of my life, and I'm grateful for every knockdown, drag out, every insult, every beating, every march, everything that ever happened to me. I'm grateful for that, because that's all part of who I am. That's
Which
kind
made
of
you who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the reception of your activities in the 60s versus the reception today, how would you compare the two about the reception with you know, the dominant community, I guess, let's put it simplified?
Well, clearly there have been some changes and some improvements. I mean, back then, I never thought we would ever have a Chicano mayor. We did. A Chicano senator. We did. A Chicano congressman. We did. Ruben Valdez and Polly Baca were really the main political figures
First
back
ones,
then.
yeah.
And but recently, Crisanta Duran was Speaker of the House, a female, first Chicana. She practically grew up on the picket line. Her dad was a union organizer. So you know, we've had things change. But I think what I find most remarkable about today's generation is that they are much more accepting of alternative points of view.
And that's so critical.
Well, it is, because I mean, back then, you know, Chicanos, we pretty much focused on Chicanos and how it affected us. Today's generation is concerned about issues that transcend.
They're much more inclusive.
Well, you know, like the environment, for example. Yeah, we're very concerned about the environment, global warming, all the kinds of issues that have, and of course it's a lot easier in a way for them because of the invention of the internet and how you're able to communicate to a wider range of audience. If I wanted to talk to 25 people back in the 60s, I needed 25 quarters and I needed to be next to a telephone. Now you can talk to 2,000 people by
the touch of the button, man.
Boom, the touch of the button. You know, so and the other issue that I think that the younger people, they're just more accepting of differences. The LGBTQ community has enjoyed a resurgence. I think primarily because of young people and their willingness to be more inclusive, more of a worldview, worldwide view community. Whereas the Chicano movement, because of the time that it was active and influential, we were fighting for our sides, for our lives, for the Chicano community. And I think so. I think that's one big difference, and I applaud them for it. I just find that they're more apt to take a worldview and be in favor of not just justice for Chicanos, but justice for everybody.
Yep.
Almost all the people that are downtrodden or who lack a champion, and there are still plenty of people whom nobody gives a damn about. You know?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And I think that's going to be our salvation. I'm very optimistic about the young people of today. I find their sincerity most gratifying, you know, and their inclusiveness. And that's even a word that's even become more and more popular. Is inclusiveness, you know, and diversity. And I think diversity also should be in diversity of opinion.
Oh, certainly.
And so I'm grateful to them for that. Recently, a Chicano teacher was not hired at North High, and I was very gratified to see these young students, these juniors and seniors from North High, take to the streets to demand that this happen. I thought that was really great. That same teacher earlier had put together a group of students who had gone out on the west side, taken pictures of the gentrification that's going on in North Denver and Highlands and so forth, places like that. So they're more inclusive, and their ideology encompasses more. It's more of a worldview.
It's a big spectrum.
Yeah, it's a worldview. I think that's important. Yeah. I found that as I've gotten older, I've become more introspective, and one of the things that I really am grateful for in recent a couple of years ago was that I was one of the founders of a group that came together called Calma, which you referenced earlier, the Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors, because the written word is so critical. in the history of our people.
Yes.
You know, things happen, and if you don't write them down,
They never
nobody
happen.
knows about them.
Yeah.
Nobody knows about them. You can go into the high schools, and they know a lot about the overall civil rights movement, but seriously lacking, is the role that we played in the
content.
in the civil rights movement for Chicanos.
Yeah.
You won't find, you know, we fancy ourselves very patriotic, and yet we leave the history of Mexican and Mexican Americans who thought that if they went to war in World War II, that this would change everything. Well, now we know that didn't happen either, and that our people won the Congressional Medal of Honor. They distinguished themselves, and yet there's not that much people know about.
No recognition.
How much we contributed to, and people need to know that history.
Absolutely.
Particularly young people. They need to know the history of how they fit in. What are my contributions? What are the contributions of my people to this country? And when they do that, and when their contributions are recognized and valued, then we not only are more proud to be an American, but we will fight and defend and improve that country.
At the front of the line, man.
And if we don't do that, then we are permanent guests in somebody else's home.
Amen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so well put.
And that has to happen, you know. And so my involvement with KAMA was really critical in my career, because our goal is to really promote, advance, to help and improve the written word of our people by us. It needs to be told by us, because we're the ones who can tell it accurately, because we were there.
Yes.
You know, people can read a book about the Chicano movement, or you can talk to me. I was there. I saw it happen. You know, so which opinion is more valuable? The one who actually lived it, or someone who read about it and then wrote a story about it?
They reiterate. It's not the same.
It's not the same. It's, you have to take it from the horse's mouth, the person
Yes.
who was actually there. And I think that's part of what KAMA is doing, and I'm so grateful for it. You know, the history of Chicano art is something that people don't know a lot about. You know, it was born out of the frustration of living that schizophrenic existence, of all the frustration and suffering under this two-tiered system.
All the brick walls we'd hit. Yeah.
Somebody once said, I don't remember who it was, he said, Chicanos exist in the hyphen between Mexican and American. Okay? So here you are, you're on this hyphen. You're not quite Mexican, you're not quite American yet. You're a hybrid of both. But you're trying to somehow or another keep both sides of you.
Both, yes.
Yeah, and you know, somebody when I was in San Antonio, somebody told me one time that I was the epitome of Mexican American, and I wasn't sure what he meant by that. I said, "What do you mean?" I thought it might be an insult.
An insult, yeah.
I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You can function in both worlds. You can be Mexican and you can be American." He said, "But a lot of us here in South Texas, we're just Mexican. You know, nobody really thinks, even though we're Americans, nobody thinks of us as Americans." He said, "You're important because you can bridge that gap between that, you know." And so my experience with KAMA has really just been eye-opening, and so I've grown so much in these last couple of years. You know, we started during the pandemic, and for the longest time we just met online, on Zoom and so forth. So, and then we had our first meeting together over at 38th and 38th.
Oh, yeah,
Lowell, and it was so wonderful to meet people whom you only had spoken to online, on Zoom and so forth. And since then, you know, we've grown exponentially. We started with 6 individuals. We're now up to about 65 people.
I talked to Christina at the last gathering. She said there was 60 authors.
Yeah, and so we're very, and I just think that we can make such an impact simply by following what our mission statement says, is to advocate for, promote, and see that our people get published. Because the statistic that I read somewhere is that only, of all the publishing houses, only 7% are dedicated to Latino authors or Latino subjects and so forth.
Wow.
So that needs to change dramatically. And so I'm, we've had some really high-profile events. Two at the
Raíces.
Raíces. Those are wonderful events that really.
They're so cool. I didn't sleep. I've been to two. I have not slept both times. I didn't sleep all night.
Yeah, we just. I recently moderated a panel on the evolution of Chicano poetry at the same place, and got a lot of kudos for that. And Colorado Springs and Pueblo people have asked us to replicate that, and so that's in the hopper. We're going to do that in the fall. But I think for now, the fact that I teach and lecture on the Chicano movement, that's one of the big loves of my life now, and the other is Calma, because I think those two are inextricably intertwined, and I think that the written word is going to really complete us, for lack of a better word. I don't know if things will ever be complete, because just about the time you think that you're reaching a modicum of justice, somebody comes along and screws that up and takes you back. You should take one step forward, and somebody comes along and screws that up, and so you're kind of back to square one. But I think we're on the right track. I guess for me, if you as like I said earlier, I said I'm closer to the end than to the beginning. I think for me, the culmination of it all will be when a Chicano or a Chicana takes the oath of office and walks into the White House, and then I can look up and say,
"It is finished,
Father, I'm home. It is finished. Yeah, Father, I'm home." That'll be probably for me when it's all over.
Yes, sir.
But for me, I guess if people ask me, what would you like for it to say on your tombstone? I never really thought about that, but I was thinking that on the way over. So I would paraphrase the Apostle Paul. I have finished the race.
Run the good race. Fought the good fight.
I have competed well, and I have kept the faith.
And see that. I don't know what happens, once that heart stops beating. And by the way, I want to send my condolences. Dee's cousin Dorothy passed away last week. She's being buried right now as we speak, and to Tony, her husband, and all the family. I know you're not on the show right now, but I just want to send my love and condolences to you all. But I also want to make sure you guys, if you're just joining us, you're watching KUHS, the stream on Malady Drive. This is the Weekend Boost, and I am your host, Paul Lane. We are talking to community activist, Chicano activist, Ricardo Laforet, one of the co-founders, as we were mentioning earlier, Calma, the Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors, which has become a very, very dear item for me as well. So, I'm just so excited to have been just a viewer of the intellect that I see gathered at these meetings, and just to be around such forward-thinking and intelligent and competent people is like, I just felt like it brought me up, man.
I feel the same way, and when I'm around people like that, it forces me to dig deeper.
Yes.
And conversations with like-minded individuals like that, you keep growing, because I hope that we never stop growing. We're always able to learn, or should be willing to learn new things, and I think that's kind of what makes the world an interesting place. I mean, diversity of opinion.
Certainly.
Talk about things that are important in the marketplace of ideas. Everything is fair game. And I think you grow a lot from that. And you never stop learning. I mean, when I talked about Chicano art as a pivotal in terms of the evolution of our people. I'm reminded of a time in 1970. I was living down in the Arkansas Valley, and I was working for the Raza Unida Party, which was short-lived, but we were in preparation for the '70 elections, in which Al Gurulé was running for governor. Sal Carpio was running for Congress. Other notable Chicanos were going to run for office in their respective counties. And I was given the task of putting together a Raza Unida conference in preparation for those. And one of the things that I had to do was secure a hall to hold this conference, and the only hall big enough was the Catholic Church auditorium. They had a school, and the auditorium was big enough for it. So I had to go and convince the church council that we needed this hall. And of course, they were also very, very nervous about Chicanos. All
There's a stigma that
all
was
these
attached to
Chicanos
it.
coming in, especially Chicanos coming in from Umas and Boulder and from Denver and so forth and all that sort of thing. So they were nervous, and I had to submit a list of invitees that were going to speak, and every marquee Chicano in the state was on there. They were, and they looked at that list, and this, I'll never forget this, and they said, everyone on this list is agreeable to us except for this person here, and it was Lalo Delgado.
Wow.
The poet. And I said to myself, I
He's
said, of all the people on this list, Lalo is the most Catholic, the most spiritual, the most peaceful, the least person you should fear. And then it came to me, why? They were afraid of the poet. And the words that poets can do.
Yes.
And the words that poetry has had, and the impact and the influence it's had on not only the Chicano movement, but social movements the world around.
Absolutely.
Pablo Neruda, Garcia Lorca, all of those people who have written poems around the world in support of liberation causes, and equality.
Yes.
And so it came to me, I said, they're afraid of Lalo because he's the poet.
Wow,
And,
that's fascinating.
I learned a lesson today. I said, because of Lalo, I said, I concluded that poetry is the eternal enemy of tyranny.
Ooh, what a statement, man! Oh man,
Yeah,
it's so true too.
Yeah, and so that's why I'm so high on what Calma can do, and what they are doing, is to show people that this is a legitimate art form.
Yes, it is.
And we've grown since, so if you go back to the 60s, when I was first starting out, all the notable Chicano poets were men. And what the Chicano poetry was lacking then was a significant feminine voice.
Yes.
And then, in the 70s and later on, other people came on. Locally, Lorna D. Cervantes, who taught at CU, Margie Domingo, Ana Castillo, Sherry Moriaga, people like this. And with the inclusion of the feminine voice into the Chicano community, Chicano poetry became a legitimate art form, as did all the other art forms, the graphic arts. Manuel Martinez, Carlos Sandoval, Jerry Jaramillo, Stefan Lucero, who passed away recently, a giant in our community of the graphic arts, and there used to be a saying from the established elite art community that Chicano art was agitprop, and that it was merely political, and that it was propaganda. But if you think about Gwen Arcia, the mural painted by Pablo Picasso, depicting the horrors of the war, what could be more political?
Absolutely.
And so I said to myself, exactly, art should be political.
Yes.
Poetry should be political. It should be able to provoke and invoke a response from people.
Yeah.
It should be there as a tool to liberate people. And
Yes.
so it has. If you've read the poetry of Pablo Neruda, you know that. If you read the poetry of Garcia Lorca, you know that. Octavio Paz, and these are all names that came to me because of my involvement with the Chicano movement. Before that, I've always loved poetry, but I love Shakespeare, I love Robert Frost, I love, all of the great Walt Whitman and so forth. Although I love that, but the Chicano movement introduced me to a world beyond that, beyond the borders of this country. You know, and most notably my favorite poet, Pablo Neruda, who is the quintessential poet for me because he said so much about injustice and about how. Well, he was a love poet too. You know, if you've read his 20 love poems, but he was just the consummate quintessential poet for me.
Wow.
And so I'm hoping that somewhere out there in the community, our community, I know there's a Pablo Neruda out there waiting to be discovered.
And wait,
you know?
yeah, that's why every week I say, you know what, a book, a writing, any great work starts with page 1.
Exactly.
And you know, there's someone out there sitting there with a pen in their hand or with their tablet there, and they're saying, I know I can write, I know I can write it. Write!
Exactly. Because nothing starts until somebody sits down and writes the first word.
Exactly.
Right?
First
you
word.
take the best book, the best play, the best song, nothing happens. Somebody else may sing it,
Yes.
but somebody had to sit down with his guitar or his piano and start writing.
Page 1.
So the writer is where it all starts, and I think that's why it's so important what Kalma is doing with the written word. I'm hoping that, like I said, there somewhere out there are these Nobel Prize winners, these Pulitzer Prize winners.
Yes, they are.
And they're in our community, and they just need to be discovered, nurtured, helped along, and encouraged. Above all, encouraged. You know, the first poem I wrote, it must have been awful. I don't even remember it. But I got better. Because writing is one of those things that the more you do it, the better you get. And the more you read, the better you get.
Oh, yeah.
You get perspectives, you know.
Absolutely.
And your whole world perspective is widened and broadened by reading other writers. So the written word is, for me, is really kind of where I wanna focus on right now. That and the history of the Chicano movement.
Man, I just got to ask you, did Lalo get into that meeting?
Oh yeah.
Oh, he did after all you persuaded him.
Yeah. He read the poem, which are you familiar with his poem, "Stupid America"?
I'm not.
I brought a copy of it
because
it illustrates for me what I'm talking about. There's somewhere out there in our community there is a Chicano who has. I hope I have it. It was Lalo's most famous poem, and it's a poem that I read when I go to mixed audiences, because this, I think, makes the whole point. And what Lalo is saying here is, shall I just read it?
Please.
This is Lalo Delgado's "Stupid America." Stupid America, see that Chicano with a big knife in his steady hand? He doesn't want to knife you. He wants to sit on a bench and carve Christ figures, but you won't let him. Stupid America, hear that Chicano shouting curses on the street? He is a poet without paper and pencil, and since he cannot write, he will explode. Stupid America, remember that Chicano flunking math and English? He is the Picasso of your western states, but he will die with only 1,000 masterpieces hanging only from his mind. And this is what we have to prevent, that little Chicanito, that little Picasso of our western states doesn't die with his masterpiece hanging only from his mind. And so this reminds me of why we need to encourage that written word, because I know that somewhere out there's that Nobel Prize winner, that Pulitzer Prize winner, just waiting to be discovered and to be encouraged, and hopefully someday when that happens, he will say, I owe a little bit of this to Kalma because they encouraged me. And I hope that's what Kalma really is all about, is encouraging new talent and also discovering new talent and promoting it and putting it out into the mainstream, so that people who are influential, who can publish or who can see that and get their books published. And I'm optimistic about that. And but we need to keep up the pressure.
Yes.
Because you remember, it's the bottom line is people. People want to see money. You know, if we can show them that there is a market for our product, then we need.
There's going to be some activity, some action.
Yeah. And I think we just, you know, look at Hollywood. I mean, you know, we're not really well represented in Hollywood, but when we are given a chance, we shine. We shine. You know, so I just think a lot more of that. People need to sit down and start writing screenplays. You write about our history. Our history is fascinating.
Oh,
you saw the Milagro Beanfield War.
Oh, one of my favorite
movies of all time.
Oh, yes.
And that really is one of my favorites of all time. Not only because of the characters, but because of the eternal message of, and that's about gentrification.
Man, I see myself. When I see that movie, I see myself growing up. I see
Exactly.
the two-class society. I see that gentrification.
Yeah, that was about building a golf course
resort
and throw people out.
Yeah. Well, you can have a good job working in the golf course.
Yeah. And the guy makes a point in the movie that as soon as all this happens, your taxes are going to go sky high. You're going to be forced to sell your property. Isn't that what happened? That's happening right now in Denver.
It's happening in Sloan's Lake. It's happening in North Denver.
Yeah, I go down there and I said, oh my God, that wasn't there. Where did that come from?
Oh,
It's a big monstrosity of 108, 120 apartments.
Units.
You know,
Yep.
and I say, you know, people said, well, we paid them fair market share. Even if that were true, with what you made on your old house, you cannot buy a new house anywhere
Where are you
else
gonna
in
go?
Denver.
Yeah.
In Denver, what with the prices sky high. So, yeah. So you know the whole idea about we paid you market. Come on,
No,
please.
no.
You know.
And
And that's about
domain-
gentrification. You know.
It is. It truly is. And you know, I heard the word gentrification probably about 10, maybe 12 years ago, and as I've gotten older and as I drive around the city, I see it happening. You know, and I'll put a TikTok video on it, and a lot of people came in and said, "So what's wrong with that?"
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that if you're the one moved in.
Yeah. Bobby Lefebvre, the current poet laureate of Colorado. I don't know if you knew that. He's a
No, I
Chicano.
didn't.
Yeah, he's the poet laureate.
Whoa.
He wrote a book. He wrote a play called Northside. It's about gentrification, and it was produced and performed at Su Teatro, and it was sold out. It was well attended and well received. That's an example of a Chicano who can go mainstream, who can tell our story, and I hope that Bobby continues on his path. I don't know for how long you hold the title of poet laureate. I think it might be a 1 or 2 year appointment, but I'm happy and I'm proud that we have a Chicano as the poet laureate
Absolutely.
of Colorado.
You know, Manuel Ramos has a short story in the Denver Noir, and it talks a little bit about North Denver gentrification. And as I read that, I just reflected, and I thought, wow, man, this is so real. I mean, it's just...
Well, Manuel is another example of going mainstream. I mean, he's written 11 novels, and I don't know if you knew this or not, but when the call came out for nominations, we discussed it at one of our meetings at Calma. And I said, I think Manuel Ramos not only should be nominated, I think he has a good chance of winning. And so I wrote up the nomination for Manuel Ramos, and we're happy to say Manuel Ramos is the first and only Chicano in the Colorado
Hall of Fame.
Colorado Writers Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, I was there when they mentioned that, and they announced that, and it was like, I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. I felt such a sense of pride, a sense of belonging, a sense of accomplishment.
You were part of it.
I was part of it.
Yeah.
You know, I was connected to it, even though I didn't write a page, but I'm in support of him. You know,
There's an old saying that a rising tide raises all ships.
all ships.
You know?
Exactly.
And that's kind of how I felt when someone distinguishes himself or herself in our community. I feel pride of that because they lift us all.
They do. They certainly
lift
do.
us all up, you know. So, yeah, I'm very pleased, and I see Manuel now around, and he's. We joke a lot because you know, when I was writing the recommendation, I said that he had discovered a genre, Chicano noir, which previously had been only for whites. The Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler kind of guys who were in San Francisco and L.A. And I said, except that Manuel Ramos's hero
World class, man.
walks the main streets of Denver.
That's right. North Denver.
Yeah. Yeah. So I took a great deal of pleasure in writing that recommendation up, and I was just so pleased when the person who we sent it to sent me a text, and she said, "Congratulations, Manuel's in. Here's the details on the reception and so forth," and that was so cool. I just and that whole idea of nominating Manuel began with Calma. We saw that there were opportunity to nominate writers, and I volunteered to do Manuel because I really thought in my heart of hearts he has a chance.
Well, he has substance.
I mean, he has a body of work.
Yeah, track record. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I really thought he had a real shot at it. And I'm so glad that I was there. I was at the. Me and Frank Davila attended the reception where he received his award. Yeah, that was great. I'm so happy.
So I got a really difficult question for you. Maybe not. So I'm not going to lie to you. You're one of my heroes. You know, I mean, I've met so many heroes through Calma, and you're one of them.
Yeah,
Who are your heroes?
You know, all of my heroes are dead. The heroes who remain for me are the men and women who continue the struggle, the people who fight for justice and peace. My heroes are those people who never get the recognition that they deserve. They don't get the awards or the plaques or the
kind of the behind the scenes.
They work behind the scenes. You know, they're quiet. They don't seek the camera. And they see something that needs to be done, and they just do it without thought about who. And there are lots of them, and it would be, I couldn't begin to end them all, so I try and put them all into a category of those who languish in the obscurity of this life, who are never thanked for their work, and the other heroes that I have are the veterans who served this country. I think I know that there was a lot of flack during the Vietnam War, and people came home they didn't have a hero's welcome. But Vietnam, I mean, those people didn't want to go to Vietnam. They went because they were sent there by their government. They fought, and regardless of what a lot of people felt, they were there not of their own choosing, but because of a sense of duty. And I think that even to this day, Vietnam remains kind of a permanent scar, or an ulcerated scar that doesn't heal, because we never welcomed them home.
Right.
We never said welcome home, you know. So every chance that I get at the Mile High Veterans, where I'm a member, I have written plays about Vietnam, and always never fail to thank those guys, you know, men and women who wore this country's uniform. I'm forever indebted to them. It's I don't know where I heard this line or something, but they provide the blanket of freedom under which we all sleep, and I'm grateful for that. So those are my heroes. All my heroes are dead. I mean, almost everybody who I ever considered a hero, Chavez, Corky, the poets, Lalo, they're all dead. They're all dead. Pablo Neruda is dead. You know, Octavio Paz is dead. All those wonderful people that had the worldview of peace and justice. You know, because eventually we're all going to end up in the same place.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
And I'm hoping to see some of my heroes there if everything works out, and say thank you, because sometimes we don't stay in touch. You know, we lose touch with you, or we become distant from them. We don't see our friends for a long time, and then they're dead all of a sudden. And you wish you could have told them that you loved them before they died. You know, I've made a pact with myself that if you're one of my heroes and I love you, I'm going to tell you while you're alive. I'm not going to wait till you're on your deathbed, or get up and give some fancy speech at your funeral and say, because I want to tell you now, brother. I want you to know now that I love you. You know, what you mean for me. You know, and of course, I guess probably the biggest hero of all was my mother, who taught me that to never be ashamed of who I was. That I was just as good as anybody else, not better, but just as good. And I probably carried that with me all my life, because I never felt inferior to anyone, in spite of some people's efforts to try and make me feel inferior. I never felt inferior, and I think that's another reason why, when the Chicano movement and I collided, that we were immediately
right for right time, right
for each other, you know?
Right for each other.
So
I'm going to ask you a kind of a tough question, and I'm going to ask you this because this is something I've lived in. You have blue eyes.
Yeah.
And you were raised in Chicano household neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Did you receive discrimination, or were you prejudiced against because you had light skin and blue eyes?
I wasn't, but I know that people were, that people tried to favor me. I know that even in school, even in grade school, I mean, when there was like a role for a play that called for a king, I got to play the king, and my darker compatriots, my friends, they got to play the shepherds.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it was always like, they got to play the janitors or the maids, and I got to play the tycoon. So I know that because I am light skinned, that I probably have benefited from that. I remember one time we were in this was during the lettuce strike in Center, Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
And there was like 5 of us, and we wanted to go to a hotel in Alamosa, and Len Avila was driving. Said, "We better send Ricardo in because if we send this guy in, they're not going to rent him a room because he's dark. He looks like." So I go in there and I put on my best redneck accent. Yeah, and they said, "What's your name?" I said, "My name's Richard." You know, so I call myself Ricardo. I pass myself off as a Gamacho because I got us a room. So I come out with a room, and hey, we got a room, but it said somebody else had gone in. So yeah, I've always and I remember one time in school. This was probably my first example of recognizing that there was something wrong. I had a friend in the 3rd grade whose name was Lee Duran, who was half black, half Chicano. And I remember my 3rd grade teacher pulling me over and saying, why do you hang around with him? And I said, well, what's wrong with that? I said, well, he's not like me and you.
Wow.
And I said, what? And he said, no, Lee's a Negro. She called him a Negro. That was the word they used back then. He's a Negro. He's not like me and you. And I said, what? You know?
Whoa. And you're a kid.
Yeah, I'm 3rd grade. You know?
And you can't conceive that.
Well, I didn't know what she meant. You know, I didn't understand what the hell is she talking about. And later I realized that what she was trying to do was, rather than focus on our common humanity, she was trying to draw distinctions between us.
Yes.
And although I'm in the 3rd grade, after that, I used to wonder about that. I used to say, well, why? Why is he different than me? And I began to...
It's internalization. I call it internalization of inferior status.
Yeah, well, I mean, I still love my friend, you know, but she had pointed something out that I wasn't aware of. I wish I would have just been allowed to be friends, who, regardless of what color, I was light-skinned, you know, had green eyes. She thought, you know, and later on I remember in the 7th grade, we had gone, no, it was in the 8th grade, and we had gone to town for a field trip, and we were supposed to learn about retail, you know, part of our lesson. And we went to JCPenney's in the little town, and the manager explained, you know, how you buy retail, sell, blah, 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 all that economic stuff. And when we got back to the school, they called 11 of us, Chicanos, into the principal's office because somebody had stolen a pair of socks.
It had to be a Chicano.
In their
mind, yeah.
Yeah, now mind you, now I'm in the 8th grade, okay? And I flew into a rage. And mind you, at that age, I said, wait a minute, why are there only Chicanos here being questioned? I said, there was at least 30 people along in that field trip. Why are there only, and they thought.
Very insightful.
Well, they thought I was crazy. They told my mom that I should probably be seen by a psychiatrist because this rebellious attitude that I had. And what rebellious? All I did was ask the question, why are we the only ones in here? Is it that you're saying that only we could have stolen those socks? And I was furious, you know, and so that really, you know, that same year is when my mom pulled me over and told me how things were, the way of the world. You know, there's going to be people who are going to do that to you because of who you are. But you're just as good as anybody, not better, but just as good. And I think, you know, you point to seminal moments in your life that may have been pivotal into your later development. That was one of them, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. And why do you hang around with those people? And well, I'm Mexican too. And the guy says, yeah, but you ain't full-blooded.
Wow.
Yeah, you may be Mexican, but you ain't full-blooded Mexican. You know, I don't know what a full-blooded Mexican was like, but yeah. But, you know, our people, you know, look, we're Spanish and Indian, right? That's our lineage. That's our raza. We're mestizos, Spanish and Indian. Some people have more Spanish blood, more Spanish genes than Indian genes. More Spanish genes, obviously, makes me laugh. But I have brothers that are dark, you know. I don't know how this happens. Every now and then it skips a generation or something or whatever. The Spanish genes predominate and you come out güero like me, you know.
Yeah.
Then, you know,
My suegra was Atencio, and she was from Central Colorado.
Yeah.
And blue-eyed, you know, and hardly spoke English. You know?
Yeah, well, I didn't speak English when I went to school, first grade. I was raised with my grandmother, and she only spoke Spanish. She knew one word in English, TV. That was it. That was my grandma's one lone English word. But yeah, would I say that there's an advantage in this society? Yes, in being lighter skinned. Yeah, I was discriminated in favor of my darker counterparts.
And having that it's an advantage because you are really truly able to see from the dominant side how this
exactly
inequality is being implemented and how there's a receding end of that the people that dish it out don't see. You know, and so it's
I could definitely see it because some of my classmates who were dark brown, I could see that they were clearly being discriminated against by this teacher who asked me why I hung around, as I wasn't full-blooded, you know. So racism. I have a very early recollection of racism. It's probably affected me the way I view the world. And you know, don't tell me that it doesn't exist. It exists.
I was a little boy. I think must have been 3rd grade. We were playing frisbee. My friend Mark and I. He's a white kid. And he threw the frisbee at me and went over the fence. It was a short fence, and I was going to go jump the fence, and the lady says, "That little Mexican better not come in my yard." And I'm a little boy, you know, and I'm like,
me.
I've never even been to Mexico.
Really.
But it was a very early, eye-opening experience
and hurtful.
You know what
Very hurtful.
It is.
But you can't be. In other words, they're saying you're the other. You know. There's this, and then there's the other. You're the other.
You're
again, you know, exists between the hyphen. You exist on the hyphen
that is
between
so,
Mexican and American. You know?
Well put, between Mexican and American. True.
Yeah.
I can imagine going to bed one night and you're Mexican. You're a Mexican citizen. You wake up the next morning and you're American.
Yeah.
But the problem was the Mexican people now said, "Hey, you ain't Mexican." But the American people said, "You're not American."
Yeah.
And so the manitos, the chileros, the cultures that are so unique in all Chicano, Latino, and all Latino cultures in this area of the United States.
It was a double-edged sword because you're not quite Mexican, but you're not quite American either. I remember the first time I went to Mexico, I was maybe 73, 74. We get in a cab, and I tell the cab driver where to go, and he said, "¿De dónde eres?" And I said, "Soy de Colorado." And he said, ¿En dónde está? He thought it was a state in Mexico. ¿En dónde queda Colorado? I said, en los Estados Unidos. He said, pero eres mexicano, ¿no? I said, soy chicano. And he said, ah, sí, los chicanos, qué curioso. No los quieren aquí, no los quieren acá. Yeah, they don't want you there and they don't want you here either, you know?
Man,
And, but
oh,
that's
man.
another way I think that you were asking about how things have changed, is that the more the dreamers and the young people who were brought here.
Latinx?
No, they were brought here as children. What do you call them? DACA.
Oh, DACA children, yes.
And dreamers, they are becoming more and more Americanized, and they're seeing. And you know, when I do these talks at the public schools, a lot of them are Mexicanos and they're DACA people. They're fascinated by that because they said we had misconceptions about what Chicanos were. We had no idea that you were fighting for us.
Wow.
You know, and so that also has changed. It opened up some eyes from the recently arrived Mexicanos to the DACA to the dreamers, that they recognize the worldview that we had about bringing our brothers and sisters from Mexico or advocating for them. I mean, I advocating for undocumented back since the 70s.
Yes.
And we had our fights with the Migra. I showed you that picture of me outside the migrant office. So that's another thing that I think has changed. And I think more and more, the more we connect with our brothers and sisters from Mexico, the better off we're going to be. And they're learning. I mean, because a lot of Mexican-born, I read somewhere where there's this first Latina is going to go into space. She's an engineer.
Yes, yes.
Did you see that?
Yes.
Now she was born in Mexico, but raised here. And you know, it's foolish to think that you're going to deport all these people, especially the ones who arrived here as children. They're American in every sense of the word.
They would be completely out of place in Mexico.
Well, yeah, they are
deport
American
them.
for all intents and
Yeah.
purposes. It makes no sense, and not to see that some of them have done so much. Like one of them is going to be a national
Contributions to.
We need to push that kind of an agenda, and that kind of a narrative really needs to be out there so that the people really truly understand that we're not immigrants at all. We are native to this land.
That's right.
And we love this land, but include us. We're in it. Okay.
Ricardo, I could talk to you all day long.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, we've run over our time, and
I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it.
Guys, I'm so thankful that you've all joined us, and you know, please join us in 2 weeks. We're going to be having another show. Having Mr. Laforia here has just been an honor to me, and you know, you've had so many good topics. And guys, I tell you every week, everyone is looking for a hero, and if you can't find one, he's standing in the mirror. She's standing in the mirror. It's you. Be the hero. Thank you for joining us. Have a great week. See you next time.